Defense wins championships, or at least that's how the saying goes. Will the Seahawks be able to buck a trend that hasn't been answering to that motto? We'll be breaking it all down here on our Thursday edition, Locked On Seahawks.
You are Locked On Seahawks, your daily Seattle Seahawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings, 12. This is Corbin Smith, host of the Locked On Seahawks podcast, your daily Seahawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. A special thanks to all the 12s who are tuning in, whether you're in nearby Everett, Washington, or listening in from Richmond, Virginia. Thanks for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. We greatly appreciate it. And a special thanks for helping make Locked On Podcast Network the #1 podcast network. The Seahawks outraced the Texans for the scoring defense title. Really, you can thank Riley Leonard, as Julian Love said, for Seattle sneaking to the #1 spot over Houston for the best scoring defense this season. That would seem to bode well going into the playoffs, but I'm going to be breaking down why being the #1 scoring defense hasn't necessarily meant championships, and also look at why that necessarily doesn't mean they aren't going to be winning the entire thing this year as well. Plus, going to be diving into which 2022 draft picks will be next to get paid by the Seahawks and who may walk, as well as a few other pending free agents upcoming when we're looking at the 2023 draft class, as well as expiring veteran contracts. All of that brought your way by Prize Picks. Download the Prize Picks app today and use the code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. Now for your lead story here on our Thursday edition of Locked On Seahawks. The Seahawks ended the season as the NFL's #1 scoring defense, giving up 17.2 points per game. The Houston Texans were ahead in that category going into the final week, and then Riley Leonard and the Colts put up a 30-plus burger on the Texans defense, and that allowed the Seahawks to jump ahead of them for their first scoring title since way back in 2015, the end of the Legion of Boom years for the Seahawks. So a historic season defensively. In fact, this was the best DVOA season defensively the Seahawks have ever had, including the 2013 and 2014 Super Bowl teams. So you can make some arguments this has been the best defense the Seahawks have ever had. The Legion of Boom would like to have a word in that regard. There's certainly some things that lean in the 2013 and 2014 teams' direction, but the saying goes, D wins championships. And to an extent, there has been truth to that, but it's been fascinating looking at the past in regard to what it is meant to be the #1 scoring defense in terms of winning Super Bowls. And when you dive into the numbers in these Super Bowl games and who has won the Lombardi Trophy, in the last 10 seasons, there has been one team that has finished #1 overall in defense and won the Lombardi. It was the New England Patriots way back in 2016. The Seahawks the year before lost in the divisional round to the Carolina Panthers, a game that they fell behind big and nearly pulled off a stunning comeback in Charlotte, came up 7 points short. But you look at the rest of the list. Vikings 2017, they get to the NFC title game, they lose. Bears 2018, they lost in the wild card round, as did the Patriots to the Titans in Tom Brady's last game in a Patriot uniform. 2019. Rams in 2020, they lost in the divisional round. Bills lose in the divisional round in 2021. 49ers and Ravens losing in the conference championship games. And then 2024, last year, the Chargers losing in the wild card round. So the moral of the story here is just because you're the #1 defense does not mean that that is going to carry over to success going deep into the playoffs, as so many of these teams finished losing in the wild card or the divisional round. Now, it is worth noting, those teams that lost in the wild card round, obviously they were not a #1 seed. They did not get a bye. They had to play the first weekend. So those teams did not have the sterling record that the Seahawks have. And a lot of those teams did not have the offense and the special teams units the Seahawks have. So historically speaking, history does not bode well, at least in terms of the #1 scoring defense. We've seen a few teams get to conference championship games in the last 3 years, but they haven't been able to get over the hump. Just one team since 2015 has made the Super Bowl with that number one defense on its resume. So that is something that Seahawks fans might be like, oh, that doesn't bode well. But here's why I wouldn't necessarily get frustrated or become worried because of the way that statistic shows itself. And the big reason why is looking at the teams that have won the Super Bowl in the last 10 years. When you dive into the Super Bowl winners, 2015, the Denver Broncos, they were fourth. They were not much behind the Seahawks that year. The season after, as I mentioned, the Patriots, the only first-ranked defense that's won a Super Bowl since 2015. But 2017, the Eagles were fourth. 2018 and 2019, the Patriots and Chiefs, they had top 10 defenses coming in at seventh. The Buccaneers as well in 2020, they were eighth. The Rams and the Chiefs, 2021 and 2022 are the anomalies here. 15th and 16th, they were still in the top half of the league. And then the last two champions, the Chiefs in 2023, they were second in scoring defense. And last year, the Eagles were second in scoring defense. So you look at this moral of the story on that front, four of the teams I just mentioned finished with top five defenses, and several others were right on the outside of that. So it's hard to win a Super Bowl if you don't have at least a really good defense. It's difficult to do. So the Seahawks being ranked first, I know that the number one scoring defense has not necessarily won Super Bowls or even gotten to Super Bowls in the last 10 years. But the fact remains that to get the job done, to get to the Lombardi, to hoist the Lombardi Trophy, it really helps to have a quality defense. And the vast majority of the Super Bowl winners in the last 10 years, they've had top 5 to top 7 defenses in the league. They have been in that upper echelon. So that, I think, works in Seattle's favor. And again, I think when you look holistically at a lot of these teams, number one scoring defense has not meant a bye week. It has not meant having the best record in the conference. There are a lot of teams that finished with the number one defense, like the Chargers last year. The Chargers were a wild card team. They didn't even win their division. So I think when you look at all of those different variables here, the Patriots in 2016 were a number one seed, and they had the number one defense. They won the Super Bowl. There aren't a lot of examples of teams that have the number one defense, though, and also had a number one seed. It just has not happened very many times. So there's not a lot of true history to look at here in the last 10 years that fully compares to where the Seahawks are at here. But the fact remains that a lot of these elite defenses, and you look at that Broncos defense in 2015 that finished fourth in scoring, that was a defense that carried the Broncos with an aging Peyton Manning at the end of his career. And he got benched that year for Brock Osweiler. The defense carried them to a Super Bowl. Kansas City's had some really good defenses that have helped pick up the slack for Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs with a number of those Super Bowl championships. The defenses were great consistently for New England, and Philadelphia's last year came in and shut down the Kansas City Chiefs offense, and that was a very, very good defense. So I think for fans that are looking at some of these past histories, these past track records, I think it is more noticeable, it is more noteworthy that teams consistently that have won the Super Bowl have had really good defenses rather than looking at just that number one ranking. And the Seahawks clearly have a defense that can carry this team, and they have an offense that at times have been able to pick up and carry the team as well. So we'll see what it ends up meaning in the postseason, but I do think this is a defense that is very capable of carrying the Seahawks into the big game and winning the big game. They're not going to be able to do it all by themselves, but as we've seen in the last 10 years, there's been plenty of examples of teams where the offenses have been average to good, not great, and the defenses have been able to carry them to championships. And so it absolutely still is fitting with that moniker that D wins championships. The Seahawks are in a better position than most teams going into this playoff tournament because of how good and how dominant that defense is at all three levels. When we come back, Charles Cross has got a new contract. Both he and Abraham Lucas extended through the next 3 seasons minimum. I'm going to be looking at the rest of Seattle's 2022 draft class. Who could be next to get paid, and which players are going to be the toughest decisions for John Schneider and company heading towards the 2026 offseason. I'll be diving into that up next here on our Thursday edition of Locked On Seahawks. Let's be real. Managing your finances can be overwhelming between subscriptions you forgot about, bills that keep going up, and trying to figure out where all your money actually goes each month. It's easy to feel like you're losing control. And who has time to track every transaction or hunt down hidden fees? That's where Rocket Money comes in, the personal finance app that helps you take control. It finds and cancels your unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and helps lower your bills so that you can grow your savings. I love how it tracks all my subscriptions and lets me cancel them right in the app with just a few taps. No more hunting down customer service numbers. The automatic transaction categorization is a game changer. I can finally see where exactly my money is going each month, and it even consolidates your checking, savings, loans, and investments into a single dashboard so you can get a clear view of your financial picture in entirety. Let Rocket Money help you reach your financial goals faster. Join Rocket Money at rocketmoney.com/locked-on. That's rocketmoney.com/locked-on. The wild card round is here, and FanDuel is officially in playoff mode. Every game during the NFL playoffs, FanDuel is giving customers even more ways to get in the action, because right now, every NFL playoff game day, FanDuel users get a profit boost pack waiting for them inside the app. Each game day, you'll get a pack loaded with multiple profit boosts that you can apply to the bets you like most. Open your profit boost pack first thing on game day and see what boosts you want to apply. The boosts give you more juice than the bets you already like, instead of forcing you to bet on something new. Every play feels bigger, and the boosts make your bets feel that way too. You make your picks, then apply your profit boost to go after even bigger payouts while the playoffs get rolling. Visit FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL, and grab your profit boost pack every NFL playoff game day. Welcome back to the Thursday edition of Locked On Seahawks. I'm your host, Corbin Smith. A special thanks to all the 12s who are listening in, and thank you as always for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. We greatly appreciate it. You already live your team every day. Now take it up a level and go ad-free. Join the Everydayer Club today and subscribe to Locked On Seahawks with no interruptions, members-only Discord access, and more, all for just $5 a month or $50 a year. Go to lockedonseahawks.supercast.com or check out the link in the show notes to learn more. John Schneider and the Seahawks giving fans even more reason to stop this past weekend after clinching the NFC West and the number one seed with a win over the 49ers on Saturday night. Charles Cross inks a 4-year, $104.4 million extension, locking down the franchise left tackle through the 2030 season. Seattle now has both of its tackles under contract for at least the next 3 years. So this is a new era for John Schneider after a long time where Seattle didn't necessarily spend the big bucks at both the tackle spots and on the offensive line in general. That has been a pivot now with these two bookends that are part of the franchise's present and future. And there's still plenty of decisions that have to be made with the 2022 draft class. This has been one of Seattle's better draft classes. I wouldn't put it quite up there with 2013, but when you consider the amount of Pro Bowl talent, a few players that have all-pro potential on this team, that 2022 group is a rookie class, helped the Seahawks get to the postseason, and now a lot of those players are foundational pieces for this number one seed, this NFC West champion in 2025. Looking at the players who are still in the final year of their rookie contract and will either need a new deal in Seattle or will test the free agent waters. You got a couple of former second-round picks in Boye Mafe, Ken Walker III, and then in the secondary, Kobe Bryant and Reek Woolen. And then rounding things out, 7th-round pick out of Lenore-Ryan, Derek Young. So 5 players that are still in the roster and half a contract that is going to expire after this season. And I posed this question on social media today. Which of the first 4 players there, Ken Walker, Boye Mafe, Reek Woolen, or Kobe Bryant, should be next in line for an extension? And Reek Woolen won it fairly handily, over 60% of voters selecting Reek Woolen. And I would tend to agree with that at this point, as far as which player needs to get a contract next. The caveat with this is that I expect that Reek Woolen, if he hits free agency, is going to get a lot of money thrown at him. The cornerback position has been one that teams have been more than happy to spend big bucks in free agency, especially in a guy who's 26 that has the athletic traits and the size and the Pro Bowl pedigree that Riq Woolen brings to the table. And if you would have asked me this a couple months ago, when there were rumors going around the Seahawks were at least entertaining the possibility of trading Riq Woolen at the deadline, if you would have asked me then about a new contract, I thought at that point that it seemed like a long shot at best. I feel a lot differently now, though, in large part because you listen to what Mike Macdonald is saying publicly, and this is not a coach that just spits out rah-rah stuff. It's not a Pete Carroll type situation. He is much more guarded on that line, and he's had nothing but positive things to say about Riq Woolen lately and how great of a guy that he is and how valued he is in the locker room. And then you add in the fact that teams are playing keep away in a lot of these games. They're not throwing the ball in his direction. He's making tackles that we haven't seen him make in the past. He had 2 massive hits in that game against San Francisco. It was a physicality that we just haven't seen from him. So it seems like the light switch has come on, and he's made plays on the football. Teams are not throwing very much at him, but when he has those chances, he's making plays on the football. I'm extremely excited to see what the Seahawks decide to do on this front now, because it seems like that light switch has come on and there's more of a maturity to Riq Woolen in the way that he carries himself on the field and off the field. And I think he's truly getting what Mike Macdonald wants out of him. Shutdown corners are hard to find. Seattle's paid for multiple shutdown guys in the past. So just because they'd extend him doesn't mean Devin Witherspoon is not getting a contract. Both these guys could get paid. So I think Riq Woolen, we'll see. We'll see if the Seahawks allow him to hit free agency. If they do, I think this is going to be a really hard guy to keep because you're going to have a lot of teams throwing a lot of money at him. He would be the player on this list that I think is most likely to get a new deal before free agency starts because of that fact. I think John Schneider knows if he does hit the market, good luck getting him back at the price that fits into your budget. As far as the second round picks, Boye Mafe and Ken Walker III, I think it's possible we could see both these guys back in a Seahawks uniform, but in large part, it's because the diminished value either from the position they play or in the case of Boye Mafe, there's no sugarcoating it. I think Boye Mafe has been a lot better than his individual statistics will show. You turn on the film, a lot of sacks for other guys in this defensive line have happened because of the pressure created by Boye Mafe. He has a pass rush win rate close to 12%. That is middle of the pack in the NFL. It's solid, but not great. He has 2 sacks this year. That is a career low in a regular season. Previously was 3 his rookie year, so he didn't get many sacks. Only had 4 quarterback hits. That ties for the fewest he's had in his career. And he played all 17 games, had 4 starts, but he played a lot of snaps, even if he was not a starter. So those numbers are underwhelming. Maybe that brings his value down enough league-wide, however, that the Seahawks can let him test the market, and there may not be the money there being thrown by other teams, and Seattle can bring him back on a multi-year deal that is more incentive-based and is at a lower price. I think if you get in that $15 million range per year, that John Schneider would consider strongly doing that just because of how much pass rushers go for. At the same time, he's 27. He's still a young player. He's had a near double-digit sack season. He's coming from the number 1 defense in the league. Teams pay a premium for all of those things that I just mentioned, and youth especially. So it may very well be a case where teams like, hey, he's almost gotten to double digits before. We think we can get him there. We're going to spend big bucks and bring him in. I just don't know that the Seahawks are going to be willing and should be willing at that to spend that kind of money on Boye Mafe when he has been inconsistent posting the numbers that would justify spending on him. And as for Ken Walker, the 1,000-yard rusher this year, second time in his career, I thought it was arguably the best season that Ken Walker has had in his career when you consider the way that he has played down the stretch. Average a career high 4.6 yards per carry, top 3 in breakaway percentage according to Pro Football Focus, top 5 in explosive runs. You name it. He's made a lot of things happen. He's near the top of the league in broken tackles, missed tackles forced as well. I just don't know at that position. He's had an injury history. He's been able to play in every game this year, but he's missed games each of his other 3 seasons. There have been questions about fit. He still has his times where he tries to bounce runs a little too much and doesn't trust his vision. I think he's gotten a lot better about that here in the second half of his 4th year, though. This one to me feels like a 50-50 proposition. A lot of it depends on what that price looks like. Maybe Seattle gets a deal done before free agency. Running backs have had a little more of a surge in terms of value in free agency for quality backs. There may be another team that wants to bring him in, and the Seahawks aren't willing to match that. But I would say that this one's a 50-50 when you consider that Zach Charbonnet still got a year on his contract. Maybe they're ready to give him the reins as the lead back next year. A lot of that boils down to what he is going to be asking for. As for the other two players on this list, Coby Bryant and Derek Young, two different players in the sense. Coby Bryant now has a year and a half starting under his belt at the safety position. Mike McDonald holds him in the highest regard for his work ethic, his preparation. I talked about this in the mailbag segment in the last couple of weeks, though. Okada's play makes this a little bit more complicated, or maybe a lot more complicated for the Seattle Seahawks, because Okada has started 13 games this year and they have not missed a beat. He's played well in both safety positions, and he is under club control for at least one more season at an affordable rate. You've got Nick Emanwari and Julian Love. You can still run your 3 safety sets the way that you want to, and maybe they draft a safety. That is a position that there are a number of teams in the league are going to need an upgrade. And I think Coby Bryant hits free agency. There's going to be a number of teams that are interested. Seattle's not going to be able to pay every single guy that needs a contract. Coby Bryant could be that odd man out, in part, though, because of Okada, that they have a little bit more flexibility to move on from him. Mike McDonald may push back against that. This may be a guy that he feels like we absolutely have got to bring back, and they'll prioritize him. But this is one that I think if he hits free agency is going to be tricky, because there's going to be a lot of other teams that need help at safety that can throw money at him that I don't know the Seahawks are going to be willing to pay for a guy who's been really rock solid, but isn't necessarily a star. And the 7th round pick, Derek Young, this is a guy I don't think you have to make a quick priority. And you maybe can re-sign him early just because you're not expecting it's going to be expensive to do so. But 32 yards per kick return this year, he showed that he could do that. He's got 8 tackles on special teams, 21 in his career. He's still a really good special teams guy. He's a core special teamer, and I'm not expecting you're going to have to pay more than a league minimum to bring him back. So I actually think there's a good chance Derek Young is re-signed and comes back for a 5th season with the Seahawks. But that'll be a decision I don't think they have to necessarily make quickly with, just because it is a role player and it's not a guy that teams are going to be throwing a ton of money at, most likely in free agency. Coming up next, I'm going to continue looking at some of the contract decisions the Seahawks have with 2023 draft picks, as well as some looming free agents and which guys may be near the top of the priority list to get something done, getting them a new contract when the offseason arrives. That'll be coming up next here on our Thursday edition, Locked On Seahawks. Hey guys, draft pick positions have now been set, at least up to the playoff teams. And so many teams are looking for their franchise quarterback. Ever wished to become a pro QB, getting drafted first overall by the Raiders? Well, now you can. There's a mobile game just for you called Ultimate QB Football Legend. In this game, you step into the cleats of a number 1 draft pick quarterback, and it's your job to lead your team to greatness to help turn a failing franchise into a dynasty. This is the number 1 QB career mode on the mobile app market. It introduced the most realistic environment with full career control, sign contracts, train and upgrade yourself, build chemistry, and evolve your teammates, give input to your GM on roster moves, play the actual games in 2D, and rise through the ranks to become a pro football legend. Ultimate QB is totally free to play. There's no ads, and it works 100% offline. Perfect for when you want to sneak in a quick game or two on the go. Just head over to ultimate-qb.com. That's ultimate-qb.com, or search for Ultimate QB in your app store. And we've got something special just for you guys. Use the promo code Locked On, all caps, in the game store to get a free boost at the start of your career. Ultimate QB Football Legend QB1. It's your legacy. Welcome back to the Thursday edition Locked On Seahawks. I'm your host, Corbin Smith. A special thanks to all the 12s who are tuning in. And thank you, as always, for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. We greatly appreciate your support of the podcast. Seahawks don't get to play this weekend. They have one of the 2 coveted byes in the playoffs. They'll be watching to learn who they'll be playing at Lumen Field in the divisional round. And keeping that in mind, we have a little bit of time to look forward while also being excited about the playoffs. And a lot of this was brought into motion with Charles Cross getting his extension, 4 years, $104.4 million, that was announced the day after the Seahawks clinched the NFC West and the number 1 seed, winning in Santa Clara. Just talk 2022 draft picks, the players that still don't have an extension, who's going to be coming back, which players may be more likely to leave after testing the market. One of the reasons that there's that possibility that Seattle may not be able to keep all of their 2022 draft picks is that there's a lot of other good players in this team that have been drafted more recently, and that 2023 draft class has 2 bona fide stars in it that will be eligible for an extension starting in March this spring. Jackson Smith-Njigba and Devin Witherspoon. And to me, both those guys are must re-signs. Now, Witherspoon has not had the wow season in terms of statistics, but if you watch the Seahawks defense, you know how important he is to setting the tone and being a physical presence. He's really good with getting his hands on the football. He's a sack master as a blitz artist. I mean, the guy can do everything. He is a tone setter for this defense. Jackson Smith-Njigba over 1,700 receiving yards this year at 23 years young. Both these guys are going to fetch big bucks, and the Seahawks absolutely need to open up the playbook or the checkbook here to get these guys paid. They deserve big contracts. Where things get tricky is after that point. And there's a few guys that I can make arguments for to extend. Now, if Ken Walker III is not coming back, and again, we don't know if that's going to be the case, maybe you extend Zach Charbonnet a year early and you make him your guy. He doesn't have quite as much wear and tear. He hasn't been a full-time starter to this point. Roughly the same age as Ken Walker III. Charbonnet could end up being a guy that you can bring back for less, and you can have him be your feature back, draft somebody else to tag team with him in 2026 and beyond. Derek Hall, there's some similar circumstances there. If you're not going to re-sign Boye Mafe, maybe you extend Derek Hall a year early and bank on him having more sacks next year and taking on a bigger role. And I think there's a little more pressure there because of the fact that Uchenna Nwosu is going to be a free agent after 2026. And then you've also got DeMarcus Lawrence going on 34 years of age, and he's been fantastic this year, but how much longer is he going to be playing at that high of a level? You may need more out of Derek Hall. Those 2 players, for that reason, I'm wondering if Seattle decides to re-sign them rather than their 2022 counterparts in Ken Walker III and Boye Mafe. So we're talking about second rounders at the same position in just 1 year apart. I can see Seattle having some interesting discussions in terms of which guys that you're going to bring back. And you have a little more flexibility to not re-sign Walker or Mafe because of those guys in Hall and Charbonnet being right there in waiting. But you also have to know that they've only got 1 year left in their contract after this year, and then you're back in the same spot. So I'm curious to see what the Seahawks do there. And I mentioned this earlier this week, and I know some 12s are not going to be excited that I keep bringing this up, but I think it is a very real possibility that Anthony Bradford gets a second contract in Seattle because he's only 24. He's given it 1 sack in the last 9 games. Yes, there's still those plays that make you scratch your head, and a lot of times his whiffs are really bad. But he, for the most part, has played pretty darn good football here in the last 9 or 10 games for the Seahawks. And he's had some big blocks in the run game. The Seahawks like to keep their own homegrown players. I don't think he's a guy that's going to be overly expensive to re-sign on a couple-year deal for a second contract and extend him here. He likes playing in Seattle. And again, he's 24. He's still a very young player that can continue to grow under the coaching of John Benton. So I actually think there is a pretty good chance that ends up happening. It could happen this offseason where Seattle decides we're going to add a couple years to your contract because we think that your best football is still ahead of you. So I could see a case where all 5 of those guys get re-signed, and a few of them maybe at the expense of a couple of these 2022 draft picks that have a year more on their resume, most likely older players that they may choose to sign their 2023 draft class and retain those guys. The other thing that has to be considered here is there are veterans that are not 2022 or 2023 draft picks for the Seahawks that have expiring contracts coming up that Seattle's going to have to make some decisions on. And I think the biggest one is Leonard Williams. He's going to be going into the final year of his contract next year. The Seahawks restructured his contract this last spring and added 2 void years. So technically, if you look at over the cap and you don't see the void label, you may think he's under contract for more than 1 year. But those are just void years to spread out the cap hits. Leonard Williams will need an extension next year. He's going to be 32 years old next year as well. I think he's still got a good 2 or 3 years of great football left in him. And I expect John Schneider is going to give him one more big contract. But it's always interesting when you're talking about a guy that's 31 going on 32 or 32 going on 33 that has played a lot of football. He came into the league as a really young player. He is now past his 10th year in the league. He's been in the league for a while. So not necessarily a slam dunk, but as dominant as he's been during his time in Seattle, I expect they're going to get that done. Uchenna Nwosu is going to be complicated as well because of the injuries the last 2 years. He was healthy this season, played in almost every game, was productive, and he gave the Seahawks a bone by taking a pay cut and a restructure. Seattle may want to pay that forward and see if they can get something done to get him locked up for a few more years, thinking those injuries and that bad luck is behind him. If Boye Mafe is not resigned, that may be more of a possibility. So you've got all these moving parts with all these players at the edge position that have 0 or 1 year left under contract. And then Jason Myers, I know he had a bad season finale in Santa Clara, but he was one of the best kickers in the league the first 17 weeks. Kickers can play at a very high level, deep into their 30s, into their early 40s. I would anticipate Seattle is going to keep status quo there at the kicker position with another contract possibility. And then I also threw Jalen Sundell on there because he's going to be a restricted free agent after next season. Seattle will have to make some decisions there. I would anticipate there's probably going to be a tender, but if he continues to play at a really high level next year, Seattle may decide we're going to get him paid now rather than wait another year where that price could go up and lock down another one of their young offensive linemen for the foreseeable future. So that is another player to bookmark for after 2026 that John Schneider might have to keep some money available, whether he's going to be a restricted free agent tender that's $3+ million, or you end up signing him to a long-term contract extension. That is another player that they have to be considering when they look beyond this year with how they're going to handle the books. As always, you can follow me on X and Blue Sky at Corbin Smith NFL. Make sure to subscribe to Locked On Seahawks on YouTube and wherever you listen to your podcast to make sure you don't miss a single episode. Coming up tomorrow, going to be starting to dive into Seattle's plans for the divisional round. Maybe make some predictions going into the postseason as well. That'll be coming your way. Blue Friday edition. Make sure to listen in and enjoy the rest of your Thursday. Go Hawks.